Welcome to our program, Astronomy for Everyone. I'm your host, Don Glaser. Our program for you today is about inspiration. People can get inspired in a number of different ways by reading, hearing a speech by an important person, sights, sounds, an individual, or even an event. We're going to talk about inspiration in how one person obtained a lifelong love of the night sky. Now, with me here in the studio is a member of the Ford Amateur Astronomy Club and the director of our program, Kevin Medin. Kevin, welcome to the program on this side of the camera.
Thanks, Don. I haven't been on this side of the camera in a while.
No, you haven't. So we're glad to have you here. We're going to talk about the books that have inspired Kevin's love of astronomy and the night sky. So, Kevin, where do you want to start?
That wasn't simple because I do have a lot of books.
All right. Well, we'll get started. Kevin, where do you want to begin?
Well, I think you were telling me that you had a map from the National Geographic Society that kind of perked your interest.
Yes, I did. It was one of those maps that come as an insert with the magazine, and this goes back into the mid-'60s, and I remember going outside with a white light flashlight. Who knew about red back then? But I sat there for hours and just looking around the night sky, learning the constellations, picking up the stars and planets that were available, and that's really my first recollection of really being engaged with the night sky. I did go on to take a couple of courses in college in astronomy, and well, the rest is history on that. But what about you?
Well, I like to say I'm old enough that Sputnik had already gone up, but I was young enough not to have my dad take me out as a 1-year-old to try to find it. But I guess my real inspiration was when NASA finally picked the original 7 astronauts. You know, I was the geek that had the poster all over the wall of the bedroom, trying to memorize all the names and all the stats about all the astronauts.
Yeah, it was quite a heady time. I remember that as well. We do have a number of books that we do want to talk about that helped influence Kevin and nurtured his interest in the sky. Which one are we going to start with first?
Well, the first one, Don, is a book called Apollo, The Race to the Moon. And what makes this book a little bit different than most of your standard books about the Apollo program is this got into the nuts and bolts about the engineering. I mean, after all, the astronauts were the face of all, Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, but without the guys with the slide rules, because obviously they didn't have supercomputers back then.
That's true.
Without those slide rule guys, they would have never made it.
That's very true. So they do play a very important role in the program.
And this book, again, was more, it had less pictures in it, so it was a lot more wordy. And it came out in 1987, so I'm guessing if it's a book that would pique somebody's interest, you'd have to go on Google or somewhere and try to find it in the ancient book category because, even though 25 years isn't a long time for a publishing house, it probably is.
Yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't find it on the bookshelf of your favorite bookstore. Staying with the Apollo theme, your next book.
It's called Tracking Apollo to the Moon, and this book was written by an Australian, which you might say, what do the Aussies know about the Apollo program? Well, what you have to remember is they didn't have the giant dishes that they had today to communicate with the satellites and or the spacecraft, a manned spacecraft. So at the time, a lot of the dishes and equipment were in Australia. In fact, the Aussies like to tell you the story that if they wouldn't have done all their homework on July 20th, 1969, we'd have never have seen the one small step that Neil Armstrong took because, right up until that point, there was a question as to whether or not there was going to be any video feed. And the Aussies like to tell you that, their urban legend is, we saved your bacon because what would have been really embarrassing if the taxpayers of the country who produced Apollo couldn't see it.
True, true. So I guess we owe a debt of gratitude to our friends down under for that one.
And in fact, I know one of our co-workers will probably remember the title of the movie, but I believe it was called The Dish. And it's a movie that came out, I believe, in the 90s, which talked about the Park Observatory and the other observatories in Australia. But this book in particular does take you right from the Gemini program all the way through Apollo, the Skylab, and shuts off right before we make the switch over to the space shuttle.
Okay, so it covers that whole period of time.
Right, when NASA actually had a good sense of direction, and it was really fun. I mean, the thing I can remember in elementary school that some of these books bring back to me is, you remember those crazy orange dishes that the elementary schools used to have on their roof to get the closed circuit TV? I can remember me and my friends going in the basement of St. Stan's School in Wyandotte, eating our lunch in like 30 seconds flat, just so we could run upstairs, grab the TV, and see the next launch.
That was a great time for the space program.
It was.
Yeah, and for any young person at the time, that interest in space and science was so critical, which I think is really something that we're lacking in our
Oh,
schools
definitely.
today.
And I think, when we made the decision to go with the shuttle, it all sounded great. And then we had that dry spell where we weren't sure what direction we were going to go in. Then a gentleman named Carl Sagan appeared on the scene, and he had been around a while, as I recall, professor at Princeton, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But until he did Cosmos and told the people that this is our planet, this is how interesting space can be, but he brought it down to our level. You don't have to be an astronomer to understand this book, and as you can see, this book's pretty dog-eared. I mean, my sister gave it to me for Christmas, and I want to say it's like 1980.
Okay.
But I don't think I'm the only one that got inspired by that show on PBS, because I think his down-home way of making a point, I think, convinced people, hey, this might be complicated, but it's exciting, and it might be a challenge for me, but I can get into it and learn something from it.
It was. I was enthralled with the TV series as well, and then equally with his next book that you have right there called The Pale Blue Dot. Yep.
Subtitled A Vision of the Human Future in Space. Well, as we all know, the human future, at least from the U.S., isn't very good right now, but nonetheless, the Pale Blue Dot title comes from I want to say Voyager 1.
Yes.
We took the backward shot of all the planets that it had visited, plus the inner planets, and it kind of made you think of all the problems we have on this planet, yet when you look from the Voyager 1 perspective, we're just a pale blue dot.
Yes, of course.
And, I mean, who's to say that we have or haven't been found by the aliens?
But it was a great photo. It really does give us a sense of our place in the universe and how small, very small we are in a way compared to everything else. And if you think about it, it really brings a new perspective to how we even interact here on the planet.
And I think the reason why he wrote the book was, yes, I know Voyager is a great machine going out deeper into space and all the other probes that followed, but he wanted to remind us that the heart of the explorer is still a human condition, and we humans still want to explore. And some people say he was living in a fantasy world, but I think Carl did a lot of good for us.
That he did. And what we're going to do now is take a quick break from our discussion. We will be back in just a few minutes. If you would like more information, please visit our website. We'll have the address for you down there at the bottom of your screen. And coming up next is Term of the Month. So don't go away. As I said, we'll be right back.
The term of the month for February 2013 is light. So you flick the switch and the light goes on, and that's all there is to it, right? The light goes on, you see it, that's it. And astronomers observe light all the time, so it's really important. So it turns out that over the years, people have had a lot of ideas on what light really is and how it works and stuff, and almost all of them have been wrong. Just about 1 million years ago, I took a physics course called optics, and since then, at least 2 bits concerning light have been in the news that were not covered in this course. Light is too complicated for a semester of physics, of college physics. So what follows is a brief history of light, and expect that it is incomplete. It really is incomplete. I'm going to start really early. In 500 BC, Empedocles wrote that the way that you see things is that the goddess Aphrodite makes fire shoot from your eyes, and it bounces back at you, and that's how you see things. Well, this sort of made sense, because at the time, people thought that everything in the universe was composed of earth, air, water, and fire. So fire was, Empedocles thought that fire was what made light work. This hypothesis is great. It makes predictions. You can test the predictions. But also the predictions fail. In this case, okay, so your eye projects something out at something and it bounces back and you see it. Well, if that's the way it works, then why can't you see in the dark? I mean, it just doesn't work. And it turns out it's wrong. By 300 BC, Euclid described reflection, and he described it mathematically, so we were making real progress. When you write down some math, you have to really understand what you're talking about. But Euclid wondered, well, how do you see stars? I mean, you're looking up in the sky, and you close your eyes, and then you open your eyes again, and you see those stars right away. There's no delay. And he thought about that for a long time, and he thought, oh, well, this fire going back and forth, it must move at infinite speed. So it doesn't matter how far away the stars are, you still see it right away. Well, light doesn't move at infinite speed. It turns out it was more than a couple thousand years before the speed of light was measured. So these ideas can persist a long time, but eventually somebody figures out something better. Anyway, it turns out that stars emit light, so you get to see them whenever you look. In 55 BC, a Roman, Lucretius, he said that that light was made up of these little tiny atoms, he called them, and he says when they get emitted, they get kicked out of wherever they're going, and they go in a straight line, and until basically they hit something. His views, unfortunately, were not accepted at the time, but eventually, at least this idea of fire from the eyes did disappear. Now we shoot forward. Now, if we shoot forward just a little bit to 100 AD, Ptolemy described refraction. So light goes through glass and it bends. By the 1600s, the next actual advance, René Descartes said light behaves like waves, and it's faster in denser medium like glass than air. And this is inspired by the idea that sound moves faster in steel, for example, than in air. It turns out to be wrong. Light moves slower in denser media like glass, and Christian Huygens stated this. The great Isaac Newton, right around the same time, he said that light was particles. Because it doesn't bend around corners. And he also showed that white light is made up of all colors. So you have a prism, light comes in, colored light comes out, but you can feed that into another prism, and you can get white light back out. Today, we understand light in a much more complicated way. It's waves and particles. It doesn't bend. It's got a finite speed. It's affected by gravity. Hot objects emit it, but it's really weird. Term of the month is light.
Welcome back to our program. We've been talking about inspiration, the things that inspire us, and we're talking with Kevin Medden, one of the members of the club and the director of our program. In the first part, we talked about Apollo and also Carl Sagan. we're going to talk about another area now that is equally inspiring, and this is the unmanned space probes that were sent out. Kevin, what of the unmanned program inspired you the most?
Well, obviously Voyager.
Yeah, we talked about that in the first
Right,
part.
but the first book that you have here, The Great Comet Crash, that's an interesting book because it's very thin. And this is a good time to talk about something. These books that are science related are very expensive because the publishing houses don't run off 1 billion copies of these things because it's very limited to who's going to purchase them.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, The Great Comet Crash pertains to comet Shoemaker-Levy 9
Exactly.
in July of 1994. And it was the first opportunity where, at least I thought, that we actually had probes up there, namely the Hubble Space Telescope, to actually watch what was happening. Because we all saw the textbooks that said, oh, many, many billions of years ago, the great bombardment of comets hit the Earth. Well, we as humans were saying, huh? Because when's the last time you've seen the comet hit our planet since you've been on, the Earth?
Zero.
But in this case, it gave them the opportunity to watch this as it happened. And the most interesting part was, can you imagine being an astronomer and having a knock on your door and saying, we've just denied you your time on the Hubble Space Telescope because something live and far more interesting than your research project is taking precedence. And that's partly what the book talks about. It has all the pictures you need to get the point across, plus a lot of the graphs that help, analyze, the different parts of the situation. So I thought it was a very interesting book, and it didn't last very long, but yet the scars could be watched, days, weeks, and even, months. So I'm sure that the astronomers probably learned more from seeing something in real time than, all the looks they could get of, looking back into the future at galaxies or whatever topic you wanted to talk about.
Exactly. I mean, it was prime time event. We were fortunate to have the Hubble Space Telescope up there. Was photographed and imaged by amateur photographers as well as images from the Hubble, and it was a fascinating time for me anyway. It kind of ranked right up there, though it doesn't eclipse, of course, Neil Armstrong, stepping on the moon. But you're watching something in space firsthand, and we so rarely get to see that.
Well, one of those few things where Ted Koppel actually had to put it on Nightline. I can remember Gene Cernan was always his sidekick when it came something to do with the space program. And that leads us to the next book, Don, which is for the National Geographic Society, which of course does an excellent job with their
Yes, they
books.
do.
And this one is called Planetology. Now you might say, that's a subject I didn't study in school, and basically it was. Because planetology tries to take apart all our terrestrial sciences and extrapolate if they still work on an alien environment. In other words, when Valles Marineris on Mars was carved out, even though, for those who don't know, that's a canyon.
Yeah, the large canyon on Mars.
Very large, it
Much
makes
bigger than the Grand Canyon.
the Grand
here on
Canyon
Earth.
doesn't look very grand, but in other words, did the same geological processes take place on Mars as on Earth? And it was a way of trying to validate what they learned. There's a subject now called astrobiology.
Exactly.
100 years ago, we didn't need that, but now we need to figure out life on Earth as opposed to life on another planet. What are the parameters? You can't necessarily say that all the theories of life on this planet are going to be on some alien world that we haven't even discovered yet.
Exactly. Why should we assume that it's going to be exactly the same somewhere else? We really need to think way outside the box and think in different ways so that we're open to something different.
Even the weather people, all of a sudden you've got 1,000-year storms on places like Jupiter, and they're saying, how does that fit into what we see on our planet?
Exactly. Now, also with Mars is your next book right here, Kevin, Postcards from Mars. Sounds like a vacation trip.
Yes, and I guess the easy way to talk about this one is to say, when you go on vacation, what do you usually do?
Send back postcards.
And this book is chock full of postcards because Jim Bell, who wrote the book, was the primary person in charge of Spirit and Opportunity. So therefore, he was in charge of the pictures from the Malin camera. And basically, he just went nuts and took a lot of pictures. And another book he put all along with this was in 3D, which of course I couldn't bring because how are we going to show 3D?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so in this book here, basically it's a nice picture book, or is there some technical information?
There's technical information, very good text, and obviously it's firsthand knowledge because he's the principal investigator, and he constantly made the point. He said, "Look, when I took this job, I thought I had a probe up there for a rover up there for a couple of months, and says I was out of a job." He says, "Boy, this book proves how wrong I was."
It's been years, and
It has.
they're still rolling right along. And now we have a new probe on Mars.
Yes,
as well.
Curiosity.
So what's next here, Kevin?
Well, as the old joke about saving the best for last, this book is The Stars Above and the Earth Below. And this book has a lot to do with the national park system in our country. And as we know, the national parks, due to the budgetary crunch, are feeling the pinch. But one of the things that national parks have started to do was hold astronomy parties. And why wouldn't you? Because the ultimate dark sky facility in our country right now are national parks, especially out west.
Well, sure, you're miles and miles away from many large cities, so your skies are going to be the best of anywhere, really.
Even Acadia National Park, which is in Maine, on top of Cadillac Mountain, they actually have major star parties now, and they're actually training the rangers in astronomy because the people who camp out overnight, they're a captive audience and they want to see things. But the interesting thing about this book is not only did it talk about the stars above and talk about and has the beautiful pictures of all the national parks, but he got into the culture. Now, as you know, out west, a lot of the culture is Native American, the Indians and the
Yes,
Pueblos and the cliff dwellers. And this book was able to assimilate all this knowledge into one easy package. And if you're like me, if you like to travel, it was a very good book because not everything had to be looking up. You could actually walk around and see what the book was actually talking about.
Do they talk about, you mentioned Acadia National Park in Maine, do they talk about any other of our national parks where this is?
At the Grand Canyon right now, even though the Grand Canyon scenery is impeccable, obviously you don't see much at night, and they say that the star party there is a 3- and 4-day event now. And Zion National Park in Utah, which has some very nice trails to go through, is also a very popular place. And I believe it's called Natural Bridges Monument in Utah, was rated as one of the darkest skies in the U.S. So that this is worth preserving, not just the legacy that we're leaving our kids from what you can see when you go to the national park, but how many of us see the Milky Way every day anymore? We don't.
Not from here in Metro Detroit, we don't.
You have to go up north like John did to see the Great Lakes stargaze, and it's a way of saying, look, stop what you're doing and look at this and say, this is worth keeping. It's not like the astronomy piece of the pie in our national budget is that huge.
No, it isn't. No. Not compared to other things. Not to say that those aren't important as well, but we really don't spend that much on it. Are there any national parks in Michigan that are doing this that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that we have a great many compared to the folks out west, but I'm sure if enough people would show up at Isle Royal at any given time, I'm sure the skies there would be
very good indeed, surrounded by Lake Superior. I know Michigan has been designating some dark sky preserves in state parks. We've got Lake Hudson State Park down near Clayton, Michigan, south of Manchester, and then a new one up in the Thumb, Lake Crescent State Park, just outside of Port Austin, the tip of the Thumb, is another one. And so it's good to see that this concept is really catching on with the powers that be, the government, the Park Service, so that we can bring this type of thing to individuals.
We talk about inspiration, and what can be more inspirational than spending your day walking through the Grand Canyon and looking at all that geology and everything else that goes in with it, and then be able to come back at night and just admire, the stars, and again, it goes back to what Sagan called us, the pale blue dot.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's awe-inspiring indeed. I know I sense it, and all of the members of our staff and crew here do. Obviously, we're very passionate about astronomy and the night sky. And we hope that you will too. We hope you've enjoyed this program on inspiration of astronomy and the night sky. If you have a question about what we've presented today, you can send us an email. We have our email address for you down there at the bottom of your screen. So we would love to hear from you. And coming up next is What's Up in the Night Sky. So stay tuned.
Welcome to What's Up in the Night Sky for February 2013. We'll start off with our phases of the moon in the month, and we're going to start the month on February the 3rd with the last quarter moon. That means it'll be visible late at night and into the early morning hours. The new moon will be on February the 10th, and that means astronomers can go out and look at the little faint fuzzies they'd love to look at because the moon won't be interfering with its light. The first quarter moon will be on February the 17th, and we'll wrap up the month with the full moon in February, and that'll be on the 25th. Now we're going to start at the beginning of February with Jupiter. It's hanging out very close to the constellation of Taurus the Bull, and high above Orion, the mighty hunter, with the bright stars Betelgeuse, some people prefer Betelgeuse, and Rigel in his knee. Mercury and Mars are in the glow of sunset, also on February the 1st. On the 3rd of February, we will have Saturn, the planet with the mighty rings, very close to a beautiful waning or shrinking crescent moon. On the 16th of February, we will have in the western by southwestern sky Mercury. This day marks the point when it is furthest to the east, greatest elongation east of the sun, which means it'll be up after the sun sets. You'll have to have a very low horizon. It's only 7 degrees above the horizon, and it'll look like a very, very tiny but brilliant pinpoint of light. Wide field binoculars, 7 by 35 would be maybe up to 10 by 50s. The wider field of view of binoculars, the easier you'll spot it in the sky. Jupiter and the moon will be gathered in the evening sky on the 18th of February. And we'll conclude the month with a planet you can't see because it's right next to the sun, and that will be Neptune, the farthest planet in our solar system, unless you're one of those Pluto lovers who still think that Pluto is a planet, minor or not. And that concludes the night sky for February 2013. Please enjoy the nighttime sky. If you have more questions, find an astronomy club. It's the best way to get started in your new career as an astronomer.